All right, let's jump right into this explainer by setting the scene. It's December 17th, 1944. We're in a freezing, snow-covered clearing just east of Bullingen in Belgium. The snow has barely even settled when a veteran German officer kneels down beside the body of a 19-year-old American private who had been killed just moments earlier. Now, this officer isn't searching for intelligence. He doesn't care about maps or codebooks. His men haven't had a hot meal in 2 days, so he's simply looking for food. He unbuckles the canvas flap of the dead soldier's haversack, starts pulling out the contents, and then he just stops. Picture the utter silence in those freezing woods for a second. What left this battle-hardened German officer completely speechless wasn't some top-secret document. It was an impossible, almost alien level of abundance. Inside that pack was a world he simply did not recognize. He pulled out 3 boxed meals sealed in wax-coated cardboard. He found foil-wrapped chocolate, powdered coffee, and real cigarettes, not the terrible cabbage leaf substitutes his own men had been choking down for months. He found a sewing kit, a safety razor with fresh blades, and, neatly folded right beneath a plastic spoon, sheets of toilet paper. Seriously? Toilet paper on a battlefield? It was a level of personal supply that no German field marshal could even dream of requisitioning in 1944, and here it was, sitting right in the pocket of a dead private.
You really have to think about the aggressive juxtaposition between 2 soldiers fighting in the exact same forest. Consider the reality for a 20-year-old German Volksgrenadier named Schutz Brandt. His pack literally contained a loaf of army bread that was padded out with sawdust, 1 single razor blade he'd been resharpening on a piece of glass for 3 weeks, and absolutely 0 soap. Why? Because the fats required to make soap were being redirected to make explosives. Compare that to the standard American private who was carrying canned meat, 5 fresh razor blades, and an individually wrapped bar of soap. And this wasn't just a temporary shortage on the German side, right? It was a glaring symptom of a much larger collapse.
To really grasp the sheer scale of this, you have to look at the staggering macroeconomics of American manufacturing. In 1944 alone, the United States produced 800,000 trucks. Germany? They managed to produce fewer than 90,000. That disparity isn't just a gap. We're talking about a completely different universe. That overwhelming advantage ran through their steel, their aluminum, rubber, and fuel. But here's the absolute kicker. That industrial might didn't stop at heavy machinery. It flowed all the way down the supply chain to the very bottom of a private's pack. Now hold that massive, global, industrial scale in your head for a second, because I want to snap your attention way down to this tiny, hyper-specific detail. 5 grams, just 5 grams of white powder sitting in a small paper envelope found in every single American's first aid pouch. This was sulfanylurea, an early synthetic antibiotic. And this brilliantly illustrates the medical miracle of that tiny powder packet. Take the story of Private Donald Whitaker. Back in July 1943, in Sicily, his femur was completely shattered by a rifle round. In World War I, just a couple of decades earlier, that wound had an 80% fatality rate because of infection. But within 4 minutes of him getting hit, a medic tore open Whitaker's own 5-gram packet of sulfa and poured it directly into the wound. It literally stopped gangrene and sepsis in its tracks. By March of 1944, he was walking again. By June, he was back in action, fighting at Normandy. 1 packet, 5 grams. A man's life saved. Meanwhile, the German war machine was suffering the brutal consequences of its own ruthless priorities. They actively chose to manufacture explosives, synthetic fuel, and rubber instead of antibiotics for their troops. A wounded German soldier basically got a simple bandage and was left to wait for medics who might never even show up. Because of this agonizing supply crisis, German forces experienced wound infection rates 3 to 4 times higher than American infantry.
So the crucial point we need to understand here is that items like soap or antibiotics were absolutely not a luxury. They were logistics deployed as a literal weapon of war. Some brilliant, nameless bureaucrat sitting at a desk in Washington did the brutal arithmetic of war and realized something profound. A clean, medicated soldier gets fewer infections, spends far fewer days in a hospital bed, and stays on the front line longer. Soap was a weapon. It just didn't look like one.
Every single item in that pack was calculated to sustain the fighter. That Hershey's Field Ration D chocolate bar? It was specifically engineered to deliver 600 calories without melting even at 120 degrees, and they actually made it taste just a little bit better than a boiled potato so soldiers wouldn't eat it as a snack before they absolutely needed it. The 4 cigarettes they included per meal. Nicotine suppressed the appetite and calmed shattered nerves. And the toilet paper? Dysentery was a leading cause of non-combat casualties, so hygiene was a literal first line of defense. The entire system thought of absolutely everything. They engineered survival right into every pocket so that the 19-year-old private didn't have to think at all. He just had to fight.
Now, this realization didn't just pop up out of nowhere in 1944. If we rewind a year earlier to Kasserine Pass in North Africa, the Germans actually won a really clean tactical victory over untested American troops. But when those German officers walked through the abandoned American supply dumps, what they saw completely terrified them. They found towering crates of real blood plasma, fresh coffee, and individually wrapped soaps. Even while celebrating a victory, the Germans realized they were fighting a relentless industrial juggernaut, an army that could just casually leave behind more supplies than a German division would see in 6 months. By late 1944, this American industrial dominance created a really bizarre problem for the Germans, leading to the sheer audacity of Operation Greif. Right in the middle of the Ardennes offensive, Hitler's most dangerous commando, a guy named Otto Skorzeny, hatched a totally desperate plan. He was going to dress English-speaking German soldiers in American uniforms, put them in captured jeeps, and send them behind enemy lines to cause chaos. But to actually pull this off, they needed absolutely flawless disguises.
And that's exactly where the mighty German industrial machine hit a brick wall. Sure, they could perfectly describe American gear in their intelligence reports, but they completely failed to actually replicate it. Skorzeny's infiltrators were doomed by the tiny, minute details. They manufactured the wrong kind of foil wrapper for Wrigley's spearmint gum. They used the wrong wax paper sleeves for the K rations. They were caught smoking German tobacco because they couldn't counterfeit American Camels. They couldn't even replicate the packaging of the 5-gram sulfanilamide packets. The whole illusion collapsed the second anyone looked closely. But an even larger disaster struck the main German advance. As starving German infantry overran abandoned American positions, they encountered a wall of abundance they simply could not walk past. They experienced what one commander called Fressia, literally a feeding frenzy. Entire units stopped their lightning-fast blitzkrieg advance dead in its tracks. They dropped everything to loot K-rations, brew real coffee, and chain-smoke real cigarettes. Officers were literally waving pistols in the air trying to get them moving again, but the men became completely combat ineffective for up to 90 minutes.
Now contrast that fatal German delay with the breathtaking speed of the American response. The entire German offensive relied on speed. They were hoping to cross the Meuse River in just 4 days. But while German soldiers sat around in the snow eating captured chocolate, Eisenhower mobilized. In just 1 week, 250,000 American soldiers and 50,000 vehicles were moved directly into battle. That legendary logistical speed was practically bought and paid for by the hours those starving Germans spent looting.
When the dust finally settled and the German offensive failed, a 1945 German Army Group B report spelled out the grim reality. They wrote that the psychological effect of opening a captured American pack was actually more demoralizing than an artillery bombardment. And it wasn't just envy. The specific word they used was Erkenntnis, recognition. It was the profound, crushing recognition that the gap between these two armies wasn't just logistical. It was a massive, civilizational gulf.
The stark philosophical difference was finally clear to everyone. The German system asked only how many weapons it could build, concentrating its dying industry on jet fighters and U-boats while leaving its own soldiers hungry, filthy, and sick. They actively sacrificed the human being to build the weapon. The American system, they didn't make that choice. It mass-produced the weapons and the human preservation. Sure, a German Panther tank was perhaps superior one-on-one to a Sherman, but America built 49,000 Shermans and packed every single private's pocket with fresh razor blades, chocolate, and soap.
And you know, we see the ultimate result of that preservation at places like Elsenborn Ridge. The untested, completely green American 99th Infantry Division absorbed the full shock of Hitler's most powerful remaining SS army, and they stopped him cold. Yes, absolutely. Those American men held the line because they were exceptionally brave. But they also held because they were preserved. They had eaten a hot breakfast. Their wounds were treated immediately with sulfa powder. They had dry socks and weapons cleaned with perfectly engineered oil. They were treated like human beings who actually mattered.
Which brings us to the core thesis of this entire explainer. Whether we're talking about war, business, or just society in general, it leaves us with a question that lingers long after the snow in the Ardennes melted. Think about it. Will a system that structurally, intentionally takes care of its privates always defeat a system that only takes care of its generals? It's a pretty powerful thought to leave you with, isn't it? The deep, civilizational meaning hidden right there inside a simple canvas pack.